Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast. We are back this week with an interview from another World of Outlaws driver who will be at the Brad Doty Classic coming up next week in Attica, Ohio. We also have a special feature this week with a recap from Mr. Derrick Bean, who followed the All-Stars out through Illinois before the July 4th holiday. We're a little late getting that added in, but we wanted to make sure we included that into this week's podcast. Also, hats are on the way. Those hats will be $20, and they should be ready at the beginning of next week. I may have some with me at the Brad Doty if they get them finished up. Shoot me a message and let me know. I've already got some orders. I will have an image of the hat up on Twitter and Facebook as soon as I have them in my hand. Jacob and I are outside the studio this week, so you're going to hear some squeaking doors, maybe some dogs barking and things like that. But we want you to make sure you remember our partners at St. Pete District Studios and make sure that you give them a call when you need your recording needs. Any podcasts, commercials, music, demos, full band recordings, whatever you need, make sure you reach out to robinrecorder@gmail.com. You can find them on Facebook at St. Pete District Studios. Also, make sure you're following us on Facebook or Twitter, wherever you choose to social media. Share with your friends and tell them about the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast. So without further ado, we're going to dive right into the interview here. Our guest this week is Mr. Logan Schuchart. We had a great conversation with him as we lead into the Brad Doty Classic and 4 days of racing over at Eldora Speedway with the Kings Royal and the makeup race of the Let's Race 2. Have a listen to our conversation with Mr. Logan Schuchart. All right, Logan, this is Clint and Jacob here with the Ohio Dirt Track Podcast. We really appreciate you giving us a call today and joining us for an interview. Are you out on the road right now?
Yeah, I'm actually headed Wixon, Michigan. Going to NGK Spark Plug. Their home base. I've never been there before, so they're great people that came on board to help us out this year, so we haven't had a chance to go out and see them yet, so we're about to go check out their facility and meet some of their employees.
So currently you have 4 wins on the Outlaw season, and you're sitting in 5th in the points. So in your eyes, how has your season gone?
I think it's good. I feel like we improve every year. Things change. Other teams change up, but I feel like we've gotten a lot better in the last couple of years, and we really learned a lot, and I think it shows on the racetrack. But I also feel like some of the other teams that we race against have also gotten a lot better. It's tough. You know that when you're racing with the World Outlaws, they're the best of the best, but we've been fortunate enough to get the job done, like you said, 4 times, and we got to win 4 races, so that's great. But there's also some nights where I wish we would do a little bit better or be a little bit more consistent. If we're not winning, I'd like to at least be in the top 5 or, in the hunt. So, we have some of those nights where we're finishing 12th or 14th or somewhere back there. So I'd like to get rid of those nights, and I feel like the more we keep going, the more we learn that those will get better and will continue to get better every year. So, right now we're tied our own, win total for a year. In 2017, we had 4 wins. So we already tied that, but I'd like to get better and be able to win a few more this year.
So do you have any specific expectations for the rest of the year, or are you just kind of leaving it open?
No, like I said, I just want to win some more races, and I'd like to run pretty well in some of these big shows coming up. I like some of these big racetracks like Lernerville. We got the Kings Royal here next week. I love Eldora. It's probably my favorite racetrack. And, Knoxville Nationals coming up. Some big shows that really define your team and define who you are. And, will put your name on the map if you do well or, come out on top in one of them. So it can really change your whole season by winning one of those races. So, we could have not won any races and show up to one of those. And if you win $175,000, you're going to feel like you're having a great season. So I'd like to keep, rolling with it. And if I'd like to see, how well we can do in some of those races.
So I wanted to, I know that you came up through the ranks starting on a go-kart, and you started out in Pennsylvania on the go-kart, and then you worked up through WKA. I know that you've got a lot of guys that you race against who came up through the go-karts in California, whether it be the outlaw karts or a different series in California. So have you gotten a chance to talk to any of those guys and see what the differences were between the World Karting Association coming up on the East Coast in go-karts and coming up in the West Coast in go-karts?
I mean, I've hung out with guys like Rico and Larson and some of those guys that have come from the West Coast, and it's definitely different. I don't racing go-karts back home when I was younger. I mean, I felt like it taught you the basics. It taught you when and how to pass somebody, how to keep yourself out of trouble, keep your momentum up and things like that, not cut off your speed. And, little simple stuff like that you could carry over to a sprint car, but they didn't handle anything like a sprint car, so that's the whole new learning curve. And, obviously go-karts don't have suspension and stuff like that, but outlaw karts are pretty cool. It'd been awesome if they had them in Pennsylvania when I was growing up. I feel like they're more similar to a sprint car than with the go-kart, what I grew up racing. So, but definitely if you watch guys like Rico and Larson when they grew up racing his outlaw karts, you watch them run the top and, little racetrack Rico has in his backyard, you see why and how they get their driving style that they do. So they're definitely pretty cool, and, I have high level of respect for all those guys that come out on the West Coast, and I just think it's different type of racing. I think we go out there, we struggled a little bit when we first went out there, and then those guys when they come to Pennsylvania, they struggle a little bit. It's just different types of racing, and it's a nice thing about running the World Outlaws. You get to travel and go to all these different racetracks, and it just makes you a better overall team driver, and you just get better.
So what was the first time, what track, where were you first time you got in a 410 sprint car?
410 or just a sprint car in general?
Either one.
The first time I was in a sprint car at all would have been Trailway Speedway. It's a little local track here back in Pennsylvania, and that's where I ran my first limited sprint car. It was actually one of Aaron Ott's race cars that his dad Don Ott built engines back home, and they were going to the mountains one weekend, and Don was nice enough to let me take the car out at Trailway Speedway when I was about 15 years old. That was the first time I got in the car, and then we got our own car together when I was 16 and ran about 20 races. So, but I got in a 410 for the first time at the end of the year in 2011 when I was 18 years old, and we took it to, we borrowed an engine and we took it to Selinsgrove, is where I got my first start in a 410.
And then it wasn't too long after that you kind of hopped on the outlaw trail. So what's it like racing with Bobby and Jacob out on the road?
That's the cool thing about our deal. There's not too many family teams out here anymore. I've always raced with my grandpa. That's all I really knew. And but it's it's awesome to be able to have him by my side. I've said it for many years, but I always looked up to my grandfather, and I still do. Growing up, it's, that's who I wanted to be like. I wanted I heard all the stories of him racing, traveling down the road, the races that he won. I knew he won the Knoxville Nationals, and I probably watched that video. I don't know, 1,000 times in my lifetime, but that's just the kind of stuff that I wanted to have the chance to do. I'm a competitor in general, whether it doesn't matter what I'm playing football or playing cornhole with my buddies, or it doesn't matter. I'm a competitor. I like to win, and racing's just something that's always been there. So I enjoy racing. It's something I've always wanted to do, and definitely my grandfather has got me into that. And he's taught me everything I know along the way.
So how valuable is it having all of his experience out on the road?
I just think, the Outlaws are the best of the best. They have the best teams, best drivers, best mechanics, and there's teams that can win on win an outlaw race on any level. You look at the All-Stars or local guys and around you guys in Ohio or Pennsylvania or California. You see it happen. Those guys win outlaw races, but I'd say the difference is you go to one of those races and there's 5 or 6 guys that are capable of winning an outlaw race. And when you travel to an outlaw race, and you have the traveling guys, and you have the local guys that show up. There's 20, 25 guys that are capable of winning that night. So it's just the quality or how many guys that are out there, and that's what makes it tough. And it's just the more you race with them, it makes you better as a driver, and it makes you learn and excel quicker. Learn quicker than what you would if you were racing locally on for a long period of time.
So when you made that jump from racing regionally or locally, what was the biggest challenge to overcome, and what was your biggest anticipation, I guess, of hitting the road full time with the Outlaws?
There's a lot to overcome. We weren't prepared or really ready to go run this deal for at least the first couple of years that we've been out here. We've been out here for 6 years now, but I'd say at least the first 3 they were all about making it to the end of the year, just to say that we did it. And that's how my grandfather felt that we could make ends meet with the Outlaws giving tow money and paying for our pit passes. We had a sponsor that's been around with my grandfather since back in the 80s, Mark Pell, Pell's Tire Service, and he sponsored us with a fuel card, and we just felt like, if we're traveling, we have a toter home, we can stay in that most of the time, that it made more sense to go on the road, and we would learn a lot more, and we would be able to make ends meet. So I actually forgot what you asked me, but
yeah, we're the challenges and I guess
okay, yeah.
And then the biggest what was the biggest thing that you did not expect about being on the road with the Outlaws?
I don't know the biggest thing I didn't expect. I knew it would be tough. As soon as we're going to go to the Outlaws, I thought he was kidding, to be honest. If anybody knows how he is, he one day he's thinking one way, and the other day he's completely different, changed his mind. So he just showed up to the shop one day. Really, he's talking on the phone with our buddy Marty Thompson, who passed away a couple of years ago, and he's a good friend of ours and sponsored our race team, and he's the one that helped talk him into it. And he just showed up to the shop one day and said, "Hey, we're gonna go on the Outlaw Tour next year." And I just kind of ignored him, like, "Okay, cool, like, all right, whatever you say." But because I knew we didn't have much, we only had one car each, one for myself, one for Jacob, and one engine each, really. And we left the first year with the engines that were in the car and one that had about 20 races on it. When most teams they'll rebuild their engines around 12, 15 races, 15 being on the high side for a lot of these guys. And so we left with an engine, as a spare that had 20 races on it already. So I still don't see how we made it then, honestly. It's tough being out here. There's still times when it's, without the help of Dryden Performance Products, NCK Spark Plugs, and everybody else that has helped us, that's on, that has their name on our car. It'd be tough to be out here, and like I said, it still is. So I don't see how we really did it the first couple of years. Not getting hotel rooms, not getting used tires from guys, and making the cars and engines last, as long as we could. We run our engines for the first part of the year until we got back home in Pennsylvania in May, and they'd have about 25 races on them, and how they didn't blow up or break them. And we've had so many, issues from, overrunning engines since then that they lasted that long, and we were able to, take it to Don Ott when we got back, and, he did the head work and, took it all apart and put it back together in, just a couple of days. So, if you try to do that now, that we would never have it done. So that we were able to do that, my grandpa was able to make ends meet and just get by. There's definitely a lot of rough times along the way with the truck breaking down, trailer breaking down, and just a lot of other obstacles that, lots of times where we thought we were going home. But just to get by that and build this team up to what it is now. We have 3-4 guys on the road with us full time, and then including my grandfather Jacob, and Jacob and I both have motorhomes that go along, and it's just really cool to see how far we've come, and how much this team has grown.
So Logan, you mentioned Dryden coming aboard. So how big was Dryden Performance Products for Shark Racing?
Oh, it was huge for us. That's kind of what we've always hoped for, that we wanted to build this up to, is that we would, be in contention to to have a sponsor like that or have somebody want to jump on board with our team. And I mean, it's always been talked about. Everybody would like a sponsor to help them and be able to go run the World Outlaw Tour or something